Welcome all of you to this time together, and I think we have quite a treat in store. Thank you for joining us via Zoom or via live on Facebook. And so today, our Alumni Award recipient interview, this is the last one, but I think with all of, it's the last one for this week, I should say, and I think it's certainly you know, if there's a silver lining to this global pandemic, it's this opportunity to get to know all these very outstanding individuals. So, oh, we're going to have a guest joining us, I think. So, well, let me go to our special person that we are going to get to know a little better today. And I want you all to meet Lynn Fenwick. And she is a Fort Hays graduate with a BS degree in elementary education. But then she just kept going. She now holds a JD degree from the Baylor University School of Law and has certainly had a wide and varied career, which we're going to talk more about today, which began as an elementary and high school teacher in Kansas and continued with a law practice as a member of the bar in Texas, Georgia, and North Carolina. And now you can find her work in a new format as an award-winning author. So we are so excited to have you, Lynn. And it's certainly, I told Lynn on a separate conversation, I shared with her that I think I want to be her when I grow up. So why don't you, and by all means, there's a chat function for all of you on this call. Please use that to direct any of your questions. I'm going to get us started, and I guess let's first just start with share with all of us, Lynn, what this entire professional career and all those changes that you've had, and I love how you have reinvented yourself. But we know about it, but let's tell more to the rest of the crowd. Tell us more about those professional journey that you've had.
Well, first of all, this is a lovely journey that I'm on right now. I'm very honored and thank you very much. My husband and I married right out of high school. And with two professional careers, you need to be adaptable. And he was the primary breadwinner. In one of his moves, I was given the opportunity to become the primary breadwinner. And I said, no, thank you very much. I like being the one that brings in a second income, and I'm glad to have you bringing in the first one. So when I graduated from Fort Hays State, he went into officer training school, and he served over 4 years in the Air Force as an Air Force officer. And so I had a teaching position in Kansas, and I stayed to finish teaching 6th grade, and then I joined him and I taught high school English in Rome, New York, and then in Holyoke, Massachusetts. So I had, my degree is elementary education, but I had taken all of the English courses that I could take, but I didn't have a foreign language. So I did not have a degree as an English teacher, but I had the classes, and so that's why I was able to teach high school English. Then we relocated to begin his professional career once he was out of the military, and we chose Texas. And I corresponded with the teaching office in Texas, and misunderstanding, they just kept pulling the usual stuff and saying, this is what you have to teach. And I could have been able to teach and then picked up some of the other courses as I was teaching, but I didn't do that. And my husband knew how much I was young enough back in that era when you had aspirations for your husband. And that was the foremost thing. And I wanted a husband who was a lieutenant, which he satisfied for me. I was awfully crazy about the Black Stallion, Walter Farley books when I was young. So I thought it would be very nice to be married to a horse ranch owner. He didn't do that one for me, but he did bring me back to Kansas in retirement. So I'm back on a farm. And I wanted to be married to a lawyer, and that probably had to do with watching on television and seeing lawyers on television. So he didn't have any interest in that, but he went down to Baylor Law School and he came home with the application for the LSAT. And I took the 20 questions and thought I can do that. And I was accepted, and that's when I went to Baylor Law School. The rest of our moves were corporate moves for him. And I practiced in Waco, Texas, and then we moved and I practiced again in the big city of Dallas. And then we moved to Georgia. And I had to take the bar to be licensed there. And about the time that I was ready to start interviewing with firms, they had no reciprocity in Georgia. And that's why I had to take the bar again. And after I did that, we moved to North Carolina. So I never practiced there. I took the bar in North Carolina and did not end up practicing there. And then we came back to Texas. And at that point, he was close enough to retirement that he said, I hope you will be happy doing something that doesn't get you all involved in your career when I'm getting close to retirement. And I was fine with that because during the moves where I didn't practice law, that is when I started writing and publishing. And I loved doing that. And the other thing that I loved was art. And I started out for one whole semester as an art major at Fort Hays. And then, as I say, I had to get practical and figure out a way to find employment more easily than I could have found with a degree in art. And when we went to Dallas, I got involved with the Dallas Museum of Art. And I went through a training process before I joined a law firm. And I was a docent there, and it was like getting a graduate degree. You had to go to a full day at the museum every Monday. And then at the end of a 9-month training course, you had to take an exam, and it was a serious exam. So I got sort of a degree from the museum in art. And then in Atlanta, I became very active in the art community, and I was on the board of the Portrait Society and the Pastel Society, and that was wonderful too. So that kind of explains my scattered career, and I loved every minute of everything. And I appreciated very much that my husband was the steady breadwinner, and I got to explore so many different things.
Well, we definitely will we will touch more on some of those professional accomplishments, but something you said in our correspondence, Lynn, resonated deeply with me. And you referred to your husband, Larry, as your cheerleader and your hero. And you two have had an amazing journey together and a partnership that has been certainly one of equality, regardless of who was a breadwinner. Can you I didn't realize though until you just said that you married right out of high school. So where did you meet? And maybe talk about that journey together.
We met in high school. I attended a little school in Byers, Kansas, and that school has merged with other schools in the county now. And so as a sophomore, I moved to Maxville, and so we graduated together. And we married in December, and he likes to say I was supposed to work and put him through college, and instead he worked and put me through law school, which I thought was a wonderful trade. And I didn't meet my first part of it because I started to school too. We both carried full loads, and we both had jobs. He had 2 jobs. I don't know what he was paid, but I was paid 90 cents an hour for my job. Of course, it was a whole lot less expensive to go to school, but my parents gave us $150 a semester, and that sort of helped with the books and the tuition, but the rest of the time we were on our own. And so we've been partners for a long time.
What would that have been like, comparing your married collegiate experience and the same age of people were single? What was that like for you in that time?
Well, there were other married couples, and we had a mobile home, a generous description of our used home. But we lived in mobile home communities. We lived on campus for one semester, and they said they needed us to, they closed the trailer park on campus. It was an eyesore, I'll be honest. But they closed it. They needed it for building. And I think we figured out how many decades it took before it became a building, but it is now. And so we had friends that were largely other married couples, and couples that we met either because they lived in the trailer park, or they had friends that they introduced us to. Our social life depended a lot on the activity card, and that was all we could afford. So we went to games, and at that time they brought people to the campus, and we never missed one of those. And there wasn't a lot of time for play. There really wasn't.
Okay, I have never heard. I've been connected with Fort Hays for decades. I've never knew that there was a trailer court on campus. That's amazing.
It was a long time ago.
Well, I could probably go down that rabbit hole and speak more about that trailer park, but let's keep going. So what was that? So we're talking about your time being on campus. How has that elementary degree really, and your time at campus, how did that prepare you for this journey that was to come?
Well, it gave me confidence. It gave me foundation. The training that I got to be an elementary teacher certainly transferred to skills to teach high school. When you have confronted a classroom full of 16 and 15-year-old boys, being a lawyer, you're not going to confront anybody. That's very much more of a challenge than some of those boys that were in my classrooms. And I got along fine there, and I got along fine practicing law. I began practicing law in that era where I was very unusual. I think there were 6 in our class, and in today's law schools, the girls outnumber the boys, the women outnumber the men. But in my time, it was unusual, and there were some challenges to it. I just acted like I didn't know the difference and did my job. And I tell the story about this one man that I began in the legal department of the Veterans Administration in Waco. And there were 2 of us that handled loan guarantee matters. And one of the people that we were supposed to deal with, they brought us files by the numbers. And I don't know whether I had odd numbered files or even numbered files, but whatever it was, they were to bring it to the proper attorney if they had to come back for a question. Otherwise, we just handled the files and didn't necessarily need to meet with them directly. This older man would walk back to our offices and walk past my door, regardless of the number on his file, and would go in to see the older gentleman. And if my boss caught him, he would insist that he get into my office with his problem. By the time that I left, he came in to see me and he said, I want to tell you, you're a good little girl. And for that era, I was okay with that because he did not mean it as an insult or something demeaning. He meant it as a compliment to an attorney. But that was an era where you had, or at least the way that I chose to approach it, all I cared about was that they respected the work I did and I treated them with respect. And if his way of admitting that he had misbehaved for quite a while, trying to avoid working with me, was to tell me that I was a good little girl, I was okay with that.
I love how you phrased, I chose to look at. I chose to define it that way. You reframed some maybe potentially disturbing or upsetting ways of looking at life, and you chose to make it. And I think that's an area of resilience that has really spoken through your career path. So I'm curious, as far as whether it's to women or men, the student of today, what kind of advice would you give them to help them in their career path? And that may not be the career path that you followed, but just in general.
I would just say, demand the most of yourself. If you do your job well and the best that you can do, because that's going to be different, then you just may surprise yourself with what you can achieve.
Do you think that spirit of demanding high quality or just a high performance out of your own self is what helped open your doors to your career path? Or was it more strategic in your approach to the different jobs and professions you've had?
I suppose we were being strategic, but at the time I didn't step back and look and say, now this is my strategic move. As I said, my husband went down to Baylor Law School and picked up the application and helped me pursue my dream that I would probably not have had the courage to do myself without his encouragement. I think you can't sit around, and you have to look for a way to be productive. And whether that's doing volunteer work or whether that's deciding that you want to change your job or your career course, you need to look for opportunities, but I don't know that I was thinking of that as being strategic. And once I was in a position, then I felt like I had the responsibility of doing the best I could.
So let's narrow down a little bit further into, you even said it's now your love journey, the love of writing and that aspect of expressing yourself. Let's talk about your writing career. At what point did you know this is what I wanted to do and I'm just waiting for the time till I can launch it? Or did you stumble upon it?
I think that the lawyer in me, when I see something that I think is interesting or unfair or being approached in the wrong way or that it's being misunderstood, all kinds of things like that, my response to that is to read, to do research, to figure it out, to see what that's all about. And then the teacher in me, after I have done that, says, oh, share this, now you have learned this and people would just love to see what you have learned. So my first book was Should the Children Pray? And I know exactly where that came from. I was watching the debates I made myself a note because I figured I would forget. And it was the Reagan-Mondale debates in 1984. I looked it up. And I was new into Dallas. I wasn't practicing law yet. And when they debated, they were quoting the same sources with contrary opinions about public school prayer. And so I thought, I want to chase this down. I want to see if they're quoting out of context or who's doing what. So I started doing the research, and the more I researched, I thought, well, I can turn this into a law review article. I was on the law review staff in law school, and I had done some other publishing magazine articles as a teacher. And so I thought, well, that will fill the gap so that when I am ready to start interviewing for positions with a law firm, it won't look like I just sat at home and watched TV. And then I found so much, and I found it so interesting. And my approach is always, I trust people to have information and then make wise judgments for themselves. I do not try to bring an advocate's position to my writing. And I was interviewed on a radio show one time, and when we went to break, he said to me, you know, you'll sell more books if you take a position. And since I have seen the quote, people don't want to be informed, they want to be affirmed. And I'm afraid that that's kind of where we are. But I'm still at if you give the people the information, then they can come to wise judgments. And that's what I have tried to do. And in Should the Children Pray, it was about sometimes schools are afraid to do something because they think it might be inappropriate. And sometimes people are doing things that may be very uncomfortable and inappropriate for some students within their student body. And so I tried to write in a way that would inform on all those issues. The next book that I wrote was Private Choices, Public Consequences. And that, once again, it came from reading articles in magazines and newspapers about all of the unusual in vitro fertilization and infertile women asking their sister to bear their child, and all kinds of things that science and medicine had taken us ahead of social awareness on those issues. And I wrote it alternating chapters, a chapter where personal stories about someone dealing with that issue are told, and then the chapter that goes into more of the research. I interviewed doctors, and I interviewed lawyers, and I interviewed a social worker, and I tried to represent all kinds of unusual ways that families were being formed, because I thought that was important. It was so early that people going to their minister or their priest, he probably said, you're thinking about what? And the courts were struggling with it, and I just thought it was a book that was needed at that time. And then the book that now is going to be released soon, Pray Bachelor, that's published by Baylor University, by the University Press of Kansas. I was in Kansas. My mother had passed away, and she had named me as the executor of her estate. And I thought, well, while I'm in Kansas, I'm going to do some genealogy research. That'll be fun. And I learned about this journal that a bachelor homesteader had kept. And I went in search of it because the lady who had owned it, she was a cousin to my father. They were born 5 days apart. She was a school teacher her whole life, taught 3 generations of kids in St. John. She is the one who had the journal, and she had passed away and nobody knew what had happened to it. And when I finally tracked it down, it was in a box in the basement in the museum that she left money to start in St. John. And I started reading it from the perspective of where are my family members mentioned. And then I realized it is a front row seat to the populist movement in Kansas. And the populist movement is such an important historical event. And I wish everybody here that knows all about the populist movement in Kansas would raise their hands, and I could see those of you on the screen if you have heard of the populist movement. It is, Kansas was at the heart of it. Yeah, I see a couple of hands. And it is not widely known today. And I thought this is something that not only Kansans, but many states in the South, Texas was the start of it. And they just don't know that history anymore. And they made a political party that is the most successful third party in our American history. It's called the People's Party. And I just wanted to share it. So once again, the researcher in me was looking at the laws and what was going on that led to this. And then the teacher in me is the one that says, oh, I hope a lot of people read this book and learn about this important thing. So that's my, my summary of my approach to writing.
And I can already tell you, I was going there and then I saw somebody quote that or post this on our chat. Can we buy your books through Amazon, or how can we be able to get our hands on some of these? Because the Prairie Bachelor is not yet out.
No, it will be out just in time for Christmas giving. It'll be out in the end of November, very end of November, or at the very beginning of December. But you can go to, I actually noticed that it is on Amazon, and they have, you would be buying it in advance. But I encourage you to go to the University Press of Kansas and buy it directly from them. And if you would like a signed book plate, they are not handling the volume that Amazon would be handling. And if you tell them when you place your order by phone or mail, you can go to their catalog, University Press of Kansas.com, and then enter the catalog. And when you get to the catalog, enter my name. And they will actually let me know that people want a signed book plate or even a personalized book plate. And I will do that and get that back to them, and it will come with your book. So that would be wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
And thank you for asking.
Well, I've had the opportunity to talk a different time with you about that book, and certainly I think is it a good way to say that you've incorporated a true story into research and historical data, which I think it takes the aspect of I'm going to learn while I read this novel type approach. But what would the genre be? What if you were to explain that I'm a writer for this genre? What would you say? How would you call it?
I would call it narrative nonfiction. Narrative nonfiction. I tried to make the academic element something that academics can use the information that's in the book and get a view that I don't think, I did a lot of research with academic books, and they're full of wonderful information, but probably not comfortable for a lot of people to read. And so I wanted it to be valuable to them, but I was really writing for general readers. And I tell the story of this Kansas homesteader who kept a journal that he wrote in every single day. It's 400 pages long. He took advice from Reverend John Beecher, so that that advice was, when you keep a journal, write about what you see, what is going on around you. Don't write this thing all about yourself. And so he became a wonderful reporter for me to learn. And then the other thing that I did in writing the book, I focused on the whole story, but about a focus on a particular community and the people in it. And I did a search on Ancestry.com of every single person that he has mentioned in that journal. And I know those neighbors better than I know my own because I went back for several generations as far as I could to try to bring those people to life and let what they were doing, the rallies, the political rallies that they went to, the community fusses when this new People's Party came into the community. And, you know, Kansas still votes Republican strongly. And many people don't realize that is because if you fought for the Union in the Civil War, you were able to credit for each 1 year that you served in the Union, you could credit 1 year towards satisfying the homestead claim. So my great-grandfather fought for the Union for 3 years, which meant that the 5 years necessary to prove up his claim was reduced to only 2 years. Lots of Union soldiers came home to their states that were more settled, and the jobs had been taken by somebody else. The businesses had been opened by somebody else. And it wasn't always easy to just settle back into their community. And there was free land in Kansas. And so a lot of our ancestors, and you know, people may or may not know this, did pick up after the Civil War, and they came to Kansas and they staked their claim. And they all voted Republican because they had fought for Lincoln's party. And that has followed to today. It may or may not be why people choose to be a Republican, but chances are that their family has been Republican since then.
Is it fair to make this statement that the first two books you wrote were definitely inspired because of your law degree and the climate of the time, and with this intention more from a legal, not that you were legalese, but that legal inspiration and maybe that knowledge base in legal, but this last book seems more of that just pure joy. Is that a fair statement, or do you still feel that there's some the themes between all three books, or have you changed somewhat your focus as you've continued your writing?
Well, the style of the last book is more story-like because it has characters and it has a main character. But the populist movement was about the politics of the time. And politics go back to the Constitution. And the Constitution is at the heart of all three books.
Very good. I like that. Well, and I think it's important to share something that is on Facebook right now from Alice McMillan Lockridge. And she basically says this about Isaac, the bachelor in your story, must be proud of the work you have done and how far you have taken the story so far of his life. And so, certainly what a testimonial and because that bachelor is a real person.
Oh, yes. Everybody in the book is a real person.
That's what I was thinking. Okay. Well,
I'm going to try to make this not quite so naughty. But one of our friends said to my husband, your wife is the only person I know who's having an affair with a dead man. Because Larry did share me with Isaac for a decade plus. And I go to the cemetery, we go to the cemetery and visit Isaac's grave. When we found it, it was It was hard to find, and we finally located it in one of the country cemeteries. And his stone was kind of askew, and we had that fixed. He's a very real person to us.
And not just, but he's real to you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. Well, there are a lot of questions about all those 3 books on chat, but I want to, before I get to everybody else's questions, I want to ask you about the blog that you have created and to tell more about how the blog fits into sharing more about you as that person and expanding upon your writing skills, and just how, can you share more about your blog?
I started the blog in the fall of 2011. I found Isaac's journal in 2010, and I transcribed all 400 pages of his neat but kind of difficult to read script. And it's in a big, huge journal, and that took me a while. And while I was doing that, every time I would come across something that was unfamiliar to me, then I would do some research. And I had started on the notion of drafting a book, and I thought it would be a nice idea if I had a blog and acquainted people with Isaac before I had the book ready to market. And I thought the other 2 books had taken no time at all to find a publisher. And so I thought I better get busy doing this. And it's a different publishing world today, a different readership world today. And it was not easy to find a home for my manuscript, particularly since I kept insisting that it be scholarly and directed toward general readers. And so I started writing, not expecting to blog for so long, but in the process of doing the research, I found so many interesting, wonderful things, and they informed me so that as I was writing, I didn't think I would go too far astray of accuracy, but it didn't necessarily end up in the book. And so I thought, well, that will be nice to just share those in my blogs. And, you know, all of us drive through Kansas and we see the little sign by the side of the road that says, turn here to go see something. And we say, you know, we ought to do that the next time we go by here. And so what Larry and I started doing is when we saw those signs, we went. I did a blog, one that comes to mind, I did a blog about the Beecher Bibles. When Reverend Beecher took an active role on the part of the Union during the Civil War, he is alleged to have raised money to buy Bibles for the Union soldiers and then put them in crates with the rifles in the bottom and Bibles on the top, labeled Bibles, and shipping them out. And there is a church in Kansas, south of Manhattan, that still exists. And it was the church of the people who came to Kansas to help make Kansas not be a slave state. And so I did a blog about the Beecher Bibles, and we have gone off-road to a lot of places and discovered some wonderful old bridges on closed roads, and I've blogged about them. Sometimes my keeping it to history of Kansas gets a little bit of a reach because after almost, I should have looked. I don't know, I think I'm moving on toward 500 blogs. And but I have learned a lot of Kansas history that isn't directly in the book, but I do think makes the book richer.
Oh,
it's once a week. I post every Thursday. I post usually late Wednesday night. And you can just, if you Google me, you will get to one of the blogs probably.
well, thanks to Mary Hammond. She just put that blog address. So, but
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Mary.
thanks, Mary. And as I love how Zoom can show my reaction. I literally had a drop jaw with the church and the Bible's on top of the gun. So that's fascinating. I love how you, I mean, I have yet to read your written word, Lynn, but your spoken word is fascinating. And I am so sorry. Let me stop asking all my questions. And this is just a treat. So let me go through our chat group here and let me go through. So ask some questions from our audience. So in today's world, this is from one of our alumni staff, Jeannie Billinger. In today's world, how does one determine the credibility of a news story or Facebook post? What resource do you use to find the truth?
Well, I think a lot of what we see is a good way to motivate us to look further. And I think it is a mistake to believe everything. You know, there was a time that we thought if it's in print, it must be right. But we as a nation have found our favorite newspapers and our favorite television channels, and we tend to only watch those. And it's a good idea to flip channels every once in a while and see what you think. I read newspapers. My listener here beside me suggested to me that I remind everyone locally that now the blog is now being produced in a couple of local newspapers, the Pratt newspaper and the St. John newspaper and the Kiowa County newspaper. And that one's harder for us to get, and that's why it slipped through my mind. But I do think that before you, I think considering the source is something that is important. I think if you have trusted a particular newspaper or a particular reporter and you haven't found them to they may be biased, but if they're still fairly accurate, well, that's some measure that they're probably making an effort to be accurate. But I think that there is a real danger to our country that we have all tended to become distrustful of those we disagree with and too trustful of people that we agree with.
Very well, thank you. And certainly Deborah Ludwig has also shared some valuable resources. Dean of our Forsyth Library, glad to see you on, so everybody could go to chat as well. But I'm going to ask a new question. Lynn Lee from our Facebook page asks, when did you write your first book? But I would like to also add on to that, maybe share when you wrote all of those books, and would you make changes to what, I mean, has your, not opinion, but it has through just time and more data, would you change anything that you wrote?
My husband is trying to help me remember the dates. The first book I wrote in 1989.
No, that was Private Choices. Was
okay,
1989.
so you're not helping me.
Yeah, I'll help you.
He's going to pull them off the shelf and look for me. They have been spaced out for a long time. Would I, while
Really,
he's...
we're both 1989. That's what the cover says.
No, that's not right.
Yeah, so it's wrong. Maybe that's the second print. I apologize.
Okay, my researcher is not helping me.
He's only been called a cheerleader and a hero, not a researcher.
89, I think 1989 was the second book about private choices, public consequences, because that was really at that time when it was beginning to, honey, I can't.
I know.
Okay, I'm not going to read. And the other book was written in, oh, I think I've got my 89 and 98 reversed. That's what's happened. The first book was 89, the second book was 98, and then the current book is going to be 2020. As far as whether I would change the content, substantively, no. But I would love to be able to add some things. I would love to be able to update Should the Children Pray? A whole lot of things have happened in our school systems and school prayer, and a lot of things have happened in terms of public schools and people making the choice to leave public schools and go to private schools, and often those schools are religious schools. So that obviously has had a big change. And then in the case of the reproductive technology, that one was the one that came out in 89.
98.
In 98, I keep doing that wrong. Came out in 98. Of course, there have been a great many changes there. And some of the things that seemed so radical are not necessarily radical. I will tell you one story in that regard that I would like to follow up on. There was a grandmother in Nebraska whose daughter was, she had her own eggs, but no womb. And so her mother gave birth to her own grandchildren. The egg came from her daughter and the sperm came from her son-in-law, but that was then transferred to her, and she carried those twins. And it would be much fun now I had talked to her. I talked to her after the kids were toddlers. And she said, oh, they're just my grandkids with all my other grandkids. I don't think about them any differently. There was also a lady in California that I interviewed for the book. And she was, she was pregnant at the same time as her daughter was pregnant. So I think she was 60, and she was married to a much younger man. And they had twins. And so here was this lady, that book is 2 decades behind. So now she's 80 years old and her kids would be just entering college. And it would be fun to talk to her and say, when they were teenagers, did you regret that choice? You know, that would have been a handful. So yes, there are things I would like to follow up on, but no, there's not really anything that the substance of what I wrote at the time I wrote it, I would not change. And I think that all of the books are, the information in them endures. I'm pleased.
Right. Well, and certainly it, like you said, it was a snapshot of the time and the climate. And so, you know, some of that may resonate yet today, and some of it, because of technology, may change. Do you have plans once you get the Prairie Bachelor on the shelf? Do you have plans for a new book or a new topic? And are you sharing?
If my husband leaves the room, I'll answer that honestly. I think he is ready to be the center of my attention, and for him to get to choose if the coronavirus is corralled enough. We have not done a lot of traveling, and we are still of an age that we would be enjoying doing that. And so I actually have some fiction that I wrote that has, I just put it into boxes, so nobody has read it but me. And I might dig some of that out and see if there is any place that it might be published. But I'm way behind, way in debt to my husband for him to get to be planning our activities for a while.
I love that. Well, and as an artist, do you from painting? I understand you paint and draw. Have you ever illustrated your own books? And I guess, what are your thoughts on illustration?
I love doing that, and I primarily work with a dry media, pastels or colored pencils, or graphite. I have done some painting. I painted an entire wall in our basement in Texas that was a map of Texas with the, from the tip of Texas all the way up to Nebraska, with the Indian tribes marked and the cattle trails marked, and then there's some little vignettes in the corner of covered wagons and a mail coach. And you know, everybody wants to draw on the wall when they're a child, and I just drew on a wall. And the house long ago sold, and Larry visited the current owners a year or so ago, and nobody had painted over it, so that was a lot of fun. But I was a jured portrait artist when I was on the board of the two organizations when we lived in Atlanta, and I was accepted as a jured portrait artist, and that's what I love to do. And I especially love to draw children, and that there are a lot of homes all across the nation, several homes, I don't say a lot of, several homes that have portraits that I did of their children. I hope I can always do that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got another question from Facebook, and it's from Alice McMillan Lockridge again. And I think this one is just too fun not to ask, but we'll see how you answer it. Did your formal training, along with teaching and courtroom experiences, give you skills that could be used to help those that moderate the 2020 style presidential debates? I had to ask that. And so that's just adorable. We'll see how you answer it.
I have strong political views, but I also feel that the people that care about my opinion will ask me personally and privately, and the people that probably would not agree with what I have to say and therefore don't ask me. I think I'm a pretty persuasive lawyer, but I don't think that it is my place to try to persuade people to agree with me. Yes, maybe I could be more persuasive and speak out, but you know, I think I'm very proud of the fact that the first book, Should the Children Pray, was several different reviewers read the book and wrote reviews. It was reviewed more than anything, more than the other book. And only 2 of the reviewers perceived my bias. One of them was adamant that I favored public school prayer. The other one was adamant that I opposed public school prayer. And that was exactly what I wanted to do. I think it's very difficult to find books that if you would just like information, that you can still find them. And that's because they're dusty on the back row. Everybody's bought the one that agrees with them. But I think it's important that I sort of don't become an advocate. My opinions are strong, and my research, I think, validates my opinion. And that's all I have to say.
I love it. I love that. But I do believe that what I hear is that spirit of the school teacher that knew that you needed to help those students be able to understand both sides. And I think that really sticks with you today. So
there's one person I would like to mention, at least one person, and that's Emma Cobb. She was my practice teacher. And at the time, I just assumed that all practice teachers were amazing. And since then, I have learned that she is a Fort Hays State legend. And I was very, very lucky to have her. And one of the things that I remember her telling me, a student had asked me something that I didn't know the answer for. I don't know how I reacted, but her advice would suggest that I didn't react right. She said, never be concerned that you don't know the answer to a child's question or a person's question. Say, That's a wonderful question. I don't know the answer, but I will look for that and get back to you. And I think that served me well as a teacher, and it served me well as an attorney. And sometimes I probably should let it serve me well when I voice my opinion and shouldn't. But she was fabulous. Another one of the teachers that I specifically remember, and I've found 3 different teachers because I thought someone might ask me about the faculty that I admired. And his name is Dr. Edwards, Clifford Edwards, and he taught American literature. And he got me so fired up about the New England authors in the 1800s that when Larry was in officer training school, as they neared graduation, they were given the opportunity to indicate regions where they would particularly like to be placed to serve. And he was sweet enough to call me and ask me if I had a preference. And of course, most of the people were choosing sunny states and, you know, warm regions. And the minute he asked me, I said, New England. And he was a sweetheart, and he put New England down first. And a lot of the people did not get their first choice, but apparently the wintry New England was not exactly the destination a lot of people sought. And so we got to go to New England, and that was such a continuation of our educations. We went to New York City, we went to the Capitol in Washington, D.C. We jumped in the car every weekend when we had time, and we just drove around. And we went to Boston and couldn't get off the freeway. And we really didn't get to see much in Boston because we weren't used to roundabouts. But that was such an important education for us. And because in the military, there were people from all over, people of different races that we became friends with. And it was really, I wish I could say to him, thank you very much that you made me fall in love with New England. And another one of the professors, I think I don't remember who it was or in what classroom, but he described fixing on the beach doing
Clams.
no, not clams,
Lobster.
lobsters, doing lobsters on the beach, going out and catching a lobster, digging a pit, putting the fire in the pit, putting the seaweed on top of the coals and cooking. I just had to have Maine lobster. I mean, so sometimes the influences and the ideas that we get from professors don't always come out of the books. And I think that's something that I remember and I'm very grateful for. I also had a teacher in my teaching course, and I wrote her name down too. I think that this is who it is, Eleanor Heil. I don't remember her name. She was the only one whose picture looked like it might have been the person I'm recalling. And she told me that as a teacher, it's very important if you will go to places where you can see your students not in a classroom environment. And so I went to the churches that my kids attended, and there was this one boy that never spoke up. He was quiet. He was kind of invisible. He wasn't one of the, quote, popular kids that was active in things. And I went to an ice hockey game, and he and his father were at that ice hockey game. And he was not the quiet kid that never said anything and never acted out in the classroom. He was a different child in that, or a high school boy. And I remember her advice, and I think that that's really important for teachers, especially in a city environment where you're not seeing the kids in your small town.
Sure. Well, I think we have a group of people that could probably take this for another hour. But since our hour is already up, I'm going to thank you to Lynn for sharing this. We're going to send you, Lynn, all of these chats that are just coming up, and they're just such a tribute to you. And so we'll send that to you. And certainly all of you that have joined us today, thank you. Want to
And
do
thank you so much, everybody, for letting me tell my stories. Thank you for coming.
Well, and I think that there's going to be, and we will share it along, but Deborah had mentioned something about you being a part of Forsyth Library, and we'll certainly get to our alumni when we have those details. She did share some. Speaking of the library, let me just do a shout out. They have a, what do you call it, a show and tell with University Archives, which is going to show at 3 p.m. today on the Forsyth Library Facebook page. So it'll be Facebook Live. And so certainly I think that it won't be necessarily focusing just on Lynn, because that's coming in December. But I think it will speak to the spirit of what we've shared today. So thanks to all of the Alumni Association for everything they have done for this week, as well as the Zoom calls. Thank you to the Fort Hays Foundation for all of their support throughout the week. And by all means, thanks to all of you for helping us make the spotlight, although virtually, shine as bright as we can on some very deserving award recipients. I hope you all can join us later tonight, because at 7 o'clock, Lynn and the other 6 awardees will be celebrated one more time to wrap up that part of homecoming celebration. So thank you very much, and you all have a wonderful day.